"If you dance this tango, I'll marry you," he mocked. But the cleaning lady danced like a true one. The sound of clinking crystal mingled with the live jazz soundtrack performed by a band hired for a fortune. Discreet yet strategically placed cameras captured every angle of the night. The Valenza mansion's garden had been transformed into a modern palace with warm lights, LED panels, floral sculptures, and waiters circulating with trays of French champagne. There was no room there for mistakes or for real feelings. Heitor Valenza was turning 50. The celebration, of course, wasn't about the time that had passed, but about the empire he had built. From construction to political lobbying, his was a name spoken with respect or fear. The guests knew it. Rio de Janeiro's elite were present. Senators, judges, CEOs, soap opera stars, and former models recycled as digital influencers. At Heitor's side, like a luxury trophy, was Bianca. 27 years old, sculpted body, trained smile, vacant gaze. She wore a gold dress so tight it seemed to scream victory. She was beautiful, but empty, and Heitor knew it. He held a glass, listened to compliments, smiled for photos, and pretended to be exactly where he wanted to be. But something bothered him. A low buzzing, an invisible crack in the mirror of his own life. 5 decades. Half a century of achievements, he repeated to himself, but why did it sound like an epitaph? Then, in a gesture half theatrical, half cruel, Heitor saw the perfect opportunity to distract himself or distract the others from his unease. "Hey you, the one with the broom, come here," he pointed with a smile that mixed charm and condescension. An immediate murmur rippled through the guests. Everyone turned to watch. Bianca arched her eyebrow, irritated. The woman in question was a cleaning employee. She wore a grey uniform, her hair tied back in a practical bun. She was crouched beside one of the columns, picking up a fallen glass. When she heard the call, she slowly stood. "Come dance with me," said Heitor, extending his hand with exaggerated comedy. "Let's show everyone this party is democratic." Laughter, complicit glances. Everyone expected the woman to blush, refuse, maybe stumble. But she didn't step back. She didn't blush. She walked toward him, her dark, steady eyes locked with his for a second. There was something strange there, not fear, not submission. It was control. "As you wish, sir," she replied in a low voice, but without a tremor. The music changed. A tango. Coincidence or destiny mocking them. The first step was hers, and when she moved, everything around them vanished. There were no more waiters, no politicians, no Bianca, only the woman in the grey uniform whose feet swept across the floor with precision, passion, and strength. Her arms led, her body breathed the music as if it were part of her. And Heitor, caught off guard, let himself be carried away. Something in his body remembered those movements, ancient echoes, long buried, sweat at his nape, his chest tight, as if he were once again a teenager hungry for the world. The ballroom plunged into stunned silence. Cell phones stopped recording. No one knew what to applaud, or if they should applaud. Bianca stood frozen, wide-eyed, swallowing the bitter taste of being overshadowed. She was the young, rich, desired woman, but she wasn't seen. Isadora. For now, the name surfaced in Heitor's mind, even if he didn't say it aloud, danced as though she were telling a story everyone had forgotten how to hear, and he was a character in that story, even without knowing the script. When the music ended, there was no bow, no thank you. Isadora released Heitor's hands, turned her back and went back to pick up the bucket, back to being the cleaning lady, as if nothing had happened. But something had. Inside Heitor, a fire had begun, and he didn't yet know it, but he would never be able to put it out. The sound of the tango still reverberated inside Heitor when he woke up the next morning. The party was already a headline on celebrity sites, with photos of him next to Bianca and comments about the host's charm and boldness. But he could barely look at the images. His mind was elsewhere, or rather with another woman, Isadora. The way she danced, the way she took control of the music, of the space, of herself. That couldn't have been mere chance. No cleaning lady danced like that. Not with that technique, not with that soul, not with that look that said, "I was someone before you tried to belittle me." Hayter stood in the dark bedroom, staring at his own reflection. And for the first time in many years, he saw himself as a stranger. The suit hanging on the chair, the Swiss watch on the dresser, the Italian shoes, everything looked like the costume of a role he no longer wanted to play. He grabbed his phone, called the house manager. "I need the name of that cleaning lady who danced with me last night. Find out now." The answer came an hour later. Isadora Fernandez, outsourced by a janitorial company. She's been working here for 5 months. Clean record, single, lives in Pena, Isadora Fernandez. The name struck like lightning. Hayter suddenly sat down. Memories resurfaced without control. A dance studio hidden in the back of a gym in Copacabana. The smell of polished wood. The sound of a bandoneon in the background. Muffled laughter, wrong steps, and a woman with a firm voice saying, "There are no lies in tango, Hayter. Either you truly dance or you don't." Isadora had been his tango teacher when he was 17. An intense, daring woman, outside the norms. With her, he had learned what freedom was. With her, he had dared to defy his father. And then, she disappeared. She ran away, they said at the time, got mixed up with the wrong people. "You'd better forget," said his father, Horacio Valenza. And he did. He buried it, like everything that bothered him. But now, the past was returning like a scream. Hayter left home without telling Bianca, went to the building where Isadora lived, waited on the corner. When she appeared in the same grey uniform carrying a grocery bag, his heart pounded as if time had rewound. She saw him, stopped, didn't smile. "We need to talk," he said, stepping forward. "We have nothing to talk about, Mr. Valenza. Isadora, it's me, Hayter. I was your student." She looked at him with cutting coldness. "I know exactly who you are, and I also know what your family did. I didn't know you knew enough to stay silent." He tried to approach. She stepped back. "You danced with me last night? Why?" "Because you challenged me, and I never turned down a challenge. But don't fool yourself, Hayter. That dance wasn't for you. It was for me, to remind myself that I'm still alive." She entered the building and left him standing on the sidewalk without an answer. But inside him, something was growing. Doubt, guilt, hunger for truth. Who was his father, really? What had he done to that woman? And more importantly, why had Hayter accepted everything in silence for so long? That night, he opened old boxes in the mansion's office. Found photos, notebooks, VHS tapes, business documents. He started digging as if excavating his own soul. Something told him the answers were there, and he would find them, even if it cost him everything he had built. The mansion was silent. Bianca hadn't returned since the party. Hayter didn't notice, or didn't care. He had spent the last 2 days without peace. Isadora's name beat in his head like a drum. The dance, the look, the memory, everything pointed to something poorly buried. On Sunday morning, Hayter took a sip of cold coffee and called his mother. "I need to see you, now." Vera Valenza answered from her apartment in Ipanema, surprised by his tone. 30 minutes later, he was there, standing in front of her, with a look she hadn't seen since Horacio died. You knew what my father did to Isadora." She didn't answer right away, served herself tea, as if she were in an interview. "What exactly are you talking about, Hayter?" "About what you did to her. The false accusations, the smear campaign, the destruction of an innocent woman, my teacher." Vera let out a weary sigh. It wasn't surprise, only annoyance. It was for your own good. Your father thought she was leading you astray. You were different back then, questioning, dreaming. I was happy. Exactly, and that made you weak in his eyes. Hayter's stomach turned. The concrete world he had helped build was beginning to crumble beneath his feet. He ordered false charges. She was accused of absurd things. They destroyed her life, all because he was afraid of losing control over me. Yes, and it worked. You grew, took over the company, became what you are today. It was a high price, but a necessary one. Necessary for whom? The silence that followed was sharp. Vera stood and walked to a bookcase. From a hidden compartment, one Hayter never knew existed, she pulled out a thin wooden box, handed it over without meeting his eyes. Your father ordered this to be kept. He said you should only see it if one day you were weak enough to regret. Looks like that day has come. In the car, Hayter opened the box with trembling hands. Inside, folders, letters, tapes. One labeled Isadora Fernandez, Damage Control. The documents listed the names of paid journalists, bribed witnesses, anonymous letters written by lawyers. A report described step-by-step the smear campaign. Isadora was accused of harassment of minors, lost sponsorships, contracts, was reported to the police, nothing proven but everything enough to destroy her. Hayter couldn't breathe. Among the material, a letter never sent. Hayter, you are not guilty of what they did to me, but you chose not to see. Even when we danced together and you saw in my eyes that something was wrong, you wanted to forget, and forgetting is a form of complicity. It was Isadora's handwriting. He pressed the paper to his chest, wanted to vomit, cry, scream, but did none of that. He simply got in the car and drove to Penha without warning, without thinking. Isadora opened the door without surprise. She was in simple clothes, hands still smelling of cleaning products. When she saw the box in his hands, she knew what it was. So, you found it. And I want the world to see it too. She wasn't moved, only crossed her arms. Why? Out of remorse? Vanity? Because guilt feels lighter when the other accepts your apology? Because it's the least I can do, and because you deserve justice. Justice now, after 20 years, after my life was ripped out by the roots and thrown to the ground like garbage? He lowered his head. The pain in his eyes was real. But it wasn't enough. I saw you dance, Isadora, and I saw the woman I destroyed without knowing. I can't give back the time, but I can give back what he tried to erase. Your voice, your name, your story. She hesitated. For a second, her voice faltered. Do you think that erases what was done? It doesn't erase, but it's a beginning. She didn't answer, but she didn't slam the door either. When he left, Isadora stood there with the box in her hands in silence, and for the first time in decades, she allowed herself to hope. On Monday, at 8 in the morning, Hayter Valença called a press conference. No one understood why. There was no project to announce, no scandal to cover up. Even his oldest advisors were confused, but he was direct. Today I will speak as a man, not as a businessman. I have no one left to protect. He wore a simple shirt, no blazer, no expensive watch, no armor. The hall of Valença Enterprises headquarters filled with cameras. In front of everyone, Hayter dropped the first bomb. For 20 years, my family was responsible for ruining the life of an innocent woman. Her name is Isadora Fernandez. Then he opened the box of documents, showed the letters, the tapes, the contracts, read excerpts from the reports, pointed out the names of journalists who had been bought, presented copies of payment receipts. Each sentence landed like a brick. All of this was done to keep me under control, to stop me from following my own path, to pull me away from the freedom that dance and that woman taught me to seek. The empire I inherited is stained, and it is my duty to clean this filth, even if it means I have to tear everything down. The silence of the journalists lasted 2 seconds. Chaos came right after. The headlines exploded. Heitor Valencia exposes his own father's frauds. Isadora Fernandez, the woman the elite tried to erase. Air breaks with millionaire legacy in pursuit of justice. The construction company's stock plummeted. Politicians cut ties. Investors fled. One of the largest clients cancelled a contract in less than 24 hours. And Bianca watched it all from a private box. The Barra penthouse that now became a prison of resentment and revenge. She called. He didn't answer. Tried contacting the press to clarify that Isadora was unstable, that she had old problems, that Heitor was being manipulated. But the journalists didn't bite. The wind had shifted. Desperate, she sought out an old Valencia family ally, a tabloid journalist willing to do anything for ratings. If it was war Heitor wanted, she would give him one. Meanwhile, Heitor went to see Isadora again. She received him coldly, but didn't stop him from entering. The box now lay open on the table in the living room, alongside notes and clippings. She'd spent the night awake, revisiting the past she had tried to bury. "You really did it," she said, emotionless. "You put your own name in the fire. I should have done it sooner. You should have, but you didn't. And now that you have, your life is rubble." He gave a half smile. "Maybe I need to start from scratch to understand who I am." She looked at him, serious. There was respect, but not forgiveness. "And what will you do with that rubble? Turn it into a foundation, if you let me help." She didn't answer, but this time she offered coffee. Outside, the world reacted with fury. Former Valencia Enterprises directors called him a traitor. Political groups began digging up shelved lawsuits to try to discredit him. Lawsuits piled up. But the dirtiest attack came from where he already expected. Bianca. 3 days after the press conference, an old video of Isadora leaked, edited, distorted, ripped out of dubious contexts, suggesting involvement with an underage student. It was a lie. But the internet didn't care. When Isadora saw the video, she turned pale. Again, the same blow, the same weapon. "It's her, Bianca." Heitor nodded. His contacts had already traced the origin of the leak. "This time it will be different. I'm on your side, and I won't leave." She almost snapped out of herself hearing that, but didn't let him touch her. "If you stand by me, you'll fall with me. Are you ready for that?" "I'm already falling. The difference is, now, I chose the fall." Isadora looked at him with teary eyes but didn't cry. There was a war being fought over reputation, dignity, truth. And for the first time, she wasn't alone. For weeks, Isadora refused all interviews. She didn't want headlines. She didn't want instant crusaders. She wanted silence and work. While Brazil debated her name on TV shows, she cleaned her own floor, reviewed documents, and walked through the suburbs trying to remember that life still existed beyond the scandal. Heitor, on the other hand, left Valencia Enterprises for good, sold his share in the company, rejected any deals, was sued for breach of contract, slander, damage to reputation. He lost friends, wealth, invitations. He gained space. With the resources he had left, he proposed something concrete. "I want to open a cultural dance center, a space for children and young people, free, non-profit, with your name." Isadora took time to answer. She knew it wasn't about charity. It was about rebuilding, about giving back what was taken from her, a place in the world. "It will be called Casa La Verda," she said a month later. "It's not about me, it's about truth. Truth dances with anyone willing to listen." They managed to rent an old warehouse in Ramos, abandoned since the 1990s. The place was dark, moldy, full of leaks. But when Isadora stepped in for the first time, she smiled like someone stepping onto a stage. This place has a soul. It's asleep, but it's here. With anonymous donations, volunteer work, and sheer stubbornness, they began the project. Heitor painted walls. Isadora marked the classrooms with masking tape on the floor. The neighborhood kids watched, curious. Some residents helped. Others remained suspicious. One day, while they were measuring the main hall, they heard strong knocks outside. It was a small, frail girl, braided hair, barefoot. She carried a worn backpack and a bag of bread. "This is going to be a dance school, right? I saw it in the neighborhood group. I want to learn." Her name was Clara, 10 years old, daughter of a missing mother and a jailed father, raised by a sick grandmother. "Have you ever danced before, Clara?" "No. But I dream of dancing every night. Like when you dream you can fly, you know." Isadora crouched to meet her eye level, looked deep into the girl's eyes. "Then we'll dance and fly together." Clara became the first student, and soon she was a constant presence on the construction site. She cleaned, organized, observed. When the main hall was finally ready, Isadora insisted on dancing the very first step with her. Heitor watched from the doorway, silent, with a discreet smile, and for the first time felt something that didn't involve power, guilt, or desire. Belonging. At night, while Clara slept on an improvised mattress in the warehouse, her grandmother had been hospitalized days earlier. Isadora and Heitor sat drinking black coffee, staring at the peeling ceiling. "You're becoming someone I can respect again," she said without looking at him. "You've always been someone I never deserved to forget." She laughed softly. There was pain there, but also reconciliation. "I'm not ready to forgive, but I'm also not ready to send you away. Then I'll stay, until you know." In the silence, the creak of the ceiling fan was the only sound, but something filled the space between them. Truth, finally standing tall. The next morning, Clara woke them with music. She had turned on an old radio and was improvising dance steps with a flip-flop and a broomstick. Isadora watched her, moved. "This girl is going to fly, but she'll need a home to come back to." Heitor understood what she meant, and he knew in that instant that his new life wouldn't be built on cement or profit. It would be built on her, and on the girl who danced with hunger and hope. The cultural center was inaugurated with little pomp, but with great meaning. No red ribbon, no official speeches, just music, shy smiles, the smell of fresh paint, and children dancing barefoot under the North Zone sun. Casa La Verdad was a living body. Clara's feet, now faster, more secure, seemed to dance, not only for herself, but for all those who had been silenced. Heitor was thinner, simpler, more present. He wore a t-shirt and paint-stained sneakers. He handled the accounting, fixed leaks, carried boxes. For the first time, he lived without a schedule. And Isadora, she was beautiful. Not in a conventional way, but in a whole way. That's why, when she began coughing blood, Heitor's world stopped. The diagnosis came quickly. An old ulcer, mistreated by years of neglect, now on the verge of rupturing. Stress, anxiety piled up, a body that had resisted too much. "You need to rest, have surgery, take care of yourself," the doctor said. But Isadora didn't want to stop. She feared leaving the center unprotected, feared it would all disappear again like before. It was Clara who held her hand in the hospital and said, "We'll hold it down out here, I promise. You taught me to be strong." "Now it's my turn," Isadora cried in silence. That was love, pure and unconditional. While she was hospitalized, Bianca was plotting. Publicly humiliated, abandoned by sponsors, rejected even at the social events she once frequented, she prepared her final strike with precision. She hired a frustrated former student from Isadora's old dance school, paid him to infiltrate as a volunteer at the center. The plan was simple: forge complaints of mismanagement, abuse, and create a scandal big enough to shut Casa La Verdad down. It was her revenge. But she hadn't counted on Clara. The sharp, attentive girl noticed the holes in the new instructor's stories. She warned Hater he didn't act with violence. He gathered evidence, recordings, witnesses, and before the plan could go public, he dismantled it. Publicly. Bianca was exposed. The audios, videos, and bank records appeared on social media the same day. Public opinion turned against her with ferocity, from influencer to public enemy in 24 hours. At the hospital, Isadora watched the news in silence. At her side, Clara held her hand tightly. Heitor was there too, exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but with a steady gaze. "You survived all of this." "Again," he said. "This time I wasn't alone," she replied, looking at the two of them. The doctor entered with the results of the surgery. Everything had gone well. Recovery would be slow but safe. Isadora closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was peace in them. "Heitor," she said. "Yes. You're no longer the man who destroyed me, nor the one who tried to save me. Now you're just you." He felt the tears rise, but didn't shed them. "And is that enough?" She smiled. A small but true smile. "It is. Now it is." That night, Clara drew something in her notebook. 3 people dancing under a spotlight. In the corner, a phrase she had heard from Isadora a month before. "Where there is dance, there is truth." The past had done everything to silence Isadora. But now she didn't dance alone, and truth finally had a stage. A year passed since Casa La Verdad's inauguration. In the neighborhood, what was once an abandoned warehouse had become a landmark. There, children learned dance, music, body expression, and above all, learned to exist with dignity. What had begun as a project of reparation became a movement. Isadora was back on the dance floor, strong, firm, whole. The scar from surgery still ached on cold days, but now it was part of her, like everything she had lived. Her name, once silenced, was now spoken in conversations, featured in articles, invited to universities. But she refused the spotlights. She preferred the children's applause at the end of class. Hater had rebuilt his life with his own hands. No more suits, no more status. But there was peace, and something rarer, purpose. Clara was growing. Her dance was a mixture of fire and innocence. When people asked if she was Hator and Isadora's daughter, she answered simply, "I'm the daughter of truth." That night, the center celebrated its first anniversary. There was no stage, just painted floors. No professional lighting, just spotlights taped in place. But there was something money couldn't buy: soul. Clara opened the event with an improvised solo. The audience, neighbors, volunteers, former students, and onlookers gave her a standing ovation. When the music stopped, Isadora stepped into the center of the circle. She asked for silence. A year ago, this place was just ruins. Today, it's a home, but not because of me, not because of Hator, not because of Clara. It's because of the choice we made. To live with truth, even if it hurts, even if it costs, because when truth dances with us, nothing can stop us. The applause came in waves, and then Hator approached. He had something in his hands. The sound of the bandoneon began to play, a slow, serene tango. He looked at her. The crowd understood before he even said anything. "Isadora Fernandez," he said with a choked voice, kneeling. "You were my teacher, my confrontation, my downfall, my redemption. You made me dance, made me be. Will you dance with me for the rest of my life?" She didn't answer with words. She took his hand, helped him up. "First, join me in one last tango. Then we'll see." They danced. It wasn't a technical performance. It was intimate, visceral. 2 bodies with history, 2 mended hearts, 2 lives that recognized each other, again, through music. At the end of the dance, Isadora looked at Clara. The girl, eyes brimming, stepped into the circle. The three of them embraced at the center of the floor, and then together they improvised a simple yet deeply meaningful choreography. The audience wept, applauded, shouted. There, on the floor marked by steps and truths, a new family was born. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, and by justice. If this dance touched you, tell me in the comments. Who is your truth today? Leave a like, subscribe, and not for me, but for everything truth can still build.